Senator McCormick. Good morning. It's Friday, February 25th, 10:18 a.m. This is the second half of the morning session of Senate Natural Resources and Energy. We're moving on to Bill S-281, an act relating to hunting coyotes with dogs. And we're going to hear from a couple people. And then Mr. O'Grady, our counsel for this bill, will be joining us around 10:30, our originally scheduled time to pick the bill up. And I've asked him to draft an amendment for the committee's review and discussion today as well. So, Mr. Bradley, thank you for coming back. I know that your schedule prohibited you from joining us. I guess it was just yesterday. I don't know. It's been a very intense week when we took up the bill last time. So thanks for coming in, and we'd love to hear your thoughts about S-281.
Thank you for the latitude, Chair Bray. I am not retired, so my work for the Federation is entirely volunteer, and it is a pretty much full-time job. I guess I'm going to ask a question, if I may, Chair Bray. The testimony I've written, approximately 2.5 pages, has to do with the previous version of the bill. And I have really no desire to waste the committee's time addressing a bill that appears to not be in play anymore. Could I ask whether what the trajectory is? I see on the agenda that this may be voted out today. Does the committee intend to, with this new version, pick it up in the very near term?
Sure. Well, thanks for that question. I'm happy to answer. So we have an amendment that the committee, we haven't publicly introduced yet. I mean, it's only been drafted in the last 24 hours. You know, I mean, we're on the daily cycles of bills as we approach crossover. So there's a new draft amendment we'll go through with Mr. O'Grady, and then the committee will decide what to do with the bill. The original listing of committee discussion and vote, I'm going to poll the committee on how it wants to proceed, but my own sense is at this moment that because the new draft involves a lot of new information and a whole new sort of dynamic in terms of working with the Fish and Wildlife Department, that rather than vote, we put the amendment on the table, have a complete discussion of it, and then we have town meeting week break coming. That will provide time. The commissioner said he would like to have time to be able to work with the committee. So if we put the amendment out, it's basically a way to publish it. And then we would have the opportunity to work with others, and we would come back to it when we return on March 8th. So I think that is my guess as to where we will go as a committee, but chairing doesn't mean ruling. Chairing means facilitating what the group wants to do. So we'll see where we go.
I understand. I'm very conscious of the value of committee time. I'm certainly happy to read my statement, my testimony, but I really don't want to waste the committee's time. If we're going to be moving with a different version, I'm happy to address that version specifically.
Okay. Well, I think if you, we could ask you to speak after, invite you to speak, after Mr. O'Grady is gone, and talk with Ms. Royer right now about some wildlife management information that I think the committee was interested in learning some more about. The commissioner supplied some information, and then I think there were some questions on top of that, and he referenced Ms. Royer, so that's why I thought it would be helpful to have her in the room with us as an expert this morning again. So would you like to wait until you've heard the amendment?
I defer to your guidance. I'm happy to go right now and cease wasting time.
Okay. Well, so I think, the underlying bill, I mean, the bill and the amendment both address the practice of taking coyotes with hounds. So I think if you have thoughts on the practice, on the value of it, et cetera, then I think that will bear on the amendment as well as the bill even as introduced. So how about if we go ahead with your statement?
Very good. I thank you for I thank you for this. My name is Chris Bradley. I am the president and executive director of the Vermont Federation of Sportsmen's Clubs, which is an organization that has existed in Vermont since 1875 and which represents 55 member clubs across Vermont with approximately 14,000 dues-paying members. I'm a registered lobbyist for the Federation, and I'm an unpaid volunteer. We began research into this bill by calling Colonel Batchelder, the head of the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Wardens, about the question of hunting coyote with hounds. We asked for his thoughts on just how prevalent it was that hounds were used to run coyotes, with specific attention to those situations where the hunter intended to kill the coyote with those hounds. My understanding was that while this was not an impossible occurrence, it is at best a very rare event where hounds are actually used to kill. The reason behind that is simple. Most hounds are expensive breeds. These hounds are often considered to be part of the hunter's family, and the owners of these hounds do not want their animals hurt or pay unnecessary vet bills, which are never cheap. To touch upon a point made yesterday by the commissioner and then further explored by Senator McCormick, nature is cruel. Very seldom does an animal go peacefully to sleep and then never wake up. Put very simply, animals have 4 modes: sleep, eat, reproduce, and avoid being killed. Coyotes, however, have no predators but humans, but they are skilled killing machines, preying on every other animal in Vermont with the exception of bear, and most assuredly prey on deer as well as livestock and house pets. We can delve into the fact that coyotes are not native to Vermont, that the appropriate term for such thing is invasive species, and that invasive species gets that name because it displaces existing species. Red fox shares the same habitat and prey as coyote, and it is a fact that the larger and more resilient coyote will force red fox out of prime habitat. Interestingly, and due to the resilience and adaptability of the coyote, we are told that no matter what we do, the population will grow. If we do nothing, it grows. And if we stress that population with hunting, it grows. Given those choices, there seems no logical outcome except to eventually reach a point where the population level becomes intolerable. It will really only take one bad human-coyote conflict or interaction for that to occur. In the face of that eventuality, the committee is currently contemplating the removal of a tool that is proven to be effective. We do not agree that a ban is the best answer, but we fully agree and support that this tool needs to be better managed. As witnessed by Maryland, one of the last states to see an incursion of coyotes in the United States, quote, public opinion concerning coyotes evolves in a very predictable fashion. As coyotes are first seen in an area, they are novel and receive a great deal of interest. As population densities and associated nuisance complaints increase through time, public opinion quickly changes from novel fascination to, quote, I do not want that animal in my neighborhood, end quote. Few, if any other wildlife species evoke as widespread and passionate disdain by the general public as coyotes, end quote. The bill at hand addresses the use of hounds on coyote. In considering that, this would be a ban on the use of hounds against an animal that is approximately the same size with a wild ability to defend itself. If the hounding of coyote is considered cruel or humane or whatever else, then we must respectfully ask the question, beyond any thoughts on the topic at hand. In Vermont, a number of animals can be hunted with hounds. With the prolific nature of coyotes versus those other animals, what makes coyotes so special? Unless coyotes are being used as a convenient starting point in a progressive march towards banning the use of hounds in all hunting. If indeed that is the case, then why should we not be exceptionally concerned over rabbit hunting with hounds or bird hunting with hounds? We ask for your help in understanding this. The use of hounds on a coyote predator is apparently bad. The use of hounds on other game is okay. Why should people who hunt bird or rabbit with hounds not be worried because they only hunt smaller animals, that they will not be labeled in due time as cruel or inhumane, that their recreational activity is not next, that their tradition will somehow be preserved? There appears to be two primary issues with hounding that are problematic. The fact that hounds can chase animals onto and or across posted property where their presence nor that activity is wanted, and the possibility that hounds may cause damage or harm by not being under control. The posted property issue is perhaps the most difficult. When the question of how a property owner protects their livestock from coyotes is brought up, hazing is one of the solutions offered, but that would literally involve around-the-clock vigils. Another suggested alternative is fencing and or electric fencing. If those are the preferred and recommended solutions to someone that does not want coyotes on their property, then why is not that the same solution for property owners that do not want game chased onto or across their property? If land is posted, then while the hounder will likely know his animals are on posted land, that hunter knows that they must first seek permission from the landowner to enter the land to retrieve their property. When and if they are allowed to do so, it would be illegal for them to take any animal. This would be as opposed to a coyote only being chased across posted property. We do understand it is an unwanted activity on private land, and the landowner may strenuously object to that activity. The hunter, however, did not intend for that trespass to happen. It must be considered an act of God force majeure. It is, in essence, little different from coyotes chasing a deer on the same property. And while a nuisance and possibly very disturbing and upsetting, in all probability, there is no harm done to the property. If there is an issue of hounds damaging property or causing harm, we believe the answer to that is found in the proposed bill H-250, which addresses a strict liability for injury caused by domestic dogs. We support that bill as it places the onus on the dog owner to properly train their canines. It would also apply to hounders, and if the hounds do not behave, the dog owner is held financially responsible. Wild animals should and must generally live in fear of humans, and it cannot be denied that our canine companions assist with that. It is, in fact, what many of them were specifically bred to do. It is clear the committee is highly motivated to do something, and there is nothing like calling for an outright ban to get that point across. After listening to the testimony of Commissioner Herrick, we suggest that the committee consider allowing the commissioner to follow through with his plan. That would entail changing this bill to the effect that coyote hunting with hounds will become a permitted activity by the legislative authority. This will be implemented based on recommendations of the Fish and Wildlife Department, with a new version additionally directing the Fish and Wildlife Board to implement the required rules, all to occur within a reasonable time period to allow for proper implementation. An outright ban on a tool that is effective at management when the logical outcome of coyote in Vermont is overabundance simply does not make sense to us until an effort has been made to more effectively manage the activity of hounding coyote, to include strict penalties for non-adherence. Thank you. That is my testimony. I am open for questions if there are any.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any committee questions, comments, etc., from Mr. Bradley? Senator McCormick?
Thanks. You mentioned the issue of cruelty, and you make a strong point. You're right that nature is cruel. I did challenge a supporter of the bill, a witness in support of the bill, with that point. And I said, would you comment on that? And her answer, I thought, I'll now invite you to comment on her answer, which was that the cruelty of coyotes taking their prey is a matter of survival. It's part of how they feed themselves. Whereas the cruelty of packs of hounds on a coyote is a sport. How do you answer that?
Dogs are bred for a very specific purpose, and they're very good at that purpose, which is tracking game. That is what they were bred for. I guess in terms of dog fighting, even one of the pictures that I've seen of this activity shows a coyote surrounded by hounds, but not apparently being attacked. These dogs are highly trained. Frankly, all animals and wildlife live in some degree of fear, and that is nature. Activities such as hunting, which is sport, and a recreational activity. This is, in fact, what is an accepted activity for many, many people across generations. Did that answer your question, sir?
Well, I asked you, and that's your answer, and I hear it, and I accept that as your answer.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Sure. I think we've all heard on the committee, between testimony taken directly and emails, phone calls, et cetera. I think we've heard from many people, and there's a whole group of. I am not myself a hunter, but so I don't have a firsthand experience to share, but I have heard from many hunters and hunting families that they regard hunting as very different than hounding coyotes. And the distinctions they make are that I think there are a few things that come up, and I'd just like to briefly ask for your thinking on this. They felt as there's a notion of fair chase that's involved in going after game like deer, et cetera. And the other thing was that when people hunt in order to procure food they're going to eat, it's quite different than hunting to kill, but not to use that animal in, I would say, sort of a respectful way. I mean, for meat or sustenance or so how do you, and so I've heard from many, many hunters who draw a bright line between their hunting practices and the taking of coyotes with hounds. Can you respond to that?
Well, I think the central point there is taking coyote. The method, whether it's by hound or otherwise, public perception of coyotes vary greatly. It only, and as I tried to point out from the Maryland quote, public perception of coyotes changes very quickly, and it'll only take one incident where coyotes are looked at in an entirely different light. These are predators. These are animals that are highly adaptable and, quite frankly, are pests to many. That is not a reason to eradicate them completely, but we are looking at, I guess I'll jump. Perhaps the committee is aware of the invasion of feral hogs in the Southwest, unwanted species, and exceptionally prolific. It's a problem. And the only way to manage that problem is to aggressively hunt them. This is a tool. Sure. I understand that perceptions of coyote can vary greatly. However, they are pests.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I see that our counselor, Mr. O'Grady, has entered the room. So not seeing any further questions at this moment for Mr. Bradley. I'd like to go to Mr. O'Grady and ask him to walk through the amendment that I asked him to prepare to bring to the committee today. Good morning, Mr. O'Grady. Thank you for coming in, and thank you for preparing an amendment for the committee to examine.
Is the amendment up on your committee website?
I don't know if it's the
1.1 is up on the website. I don't know if there's a different one, Michael.
Yeah, the 1.3 needs
Oh,
to be up
sorry.
on the website.
I'll put it up.
Can you screen share 1.3 with the committee and walk us through it?
Are you asking me to do that?
Yes, please.
It's going to take about 10 minutes because I have to email myself since it's not up on the committee website.
I see. Okay.
I'll put it up in a minute. I'm looking for it.
All right. So while that technical fix is going on, I'd like to, we're being flexible today, moving back and forth. So Ms. Royer, thanks for coming back to the committee. I just wanted to check in on something we heard from the commissioner, make sure that I heard it correctly. And that was that in terms of managing the point of wildlife management is, to keep a healthy population out there, balance between populations, et cetera, that the hunting coyotes didn't serve that wildlife management role in terms of maintaining for population control, but was rather most useful in terms of managing coyote behavior. So I think what he was saying was, it wasn't that hunting was going to eliminate their numbers. It was that you might be able to move coyotes out of an area of conflict through activities such as hazing. Can you speak to that a little bit, fill us in a little more? I'm sure that was a gross simplification, what I just said.
Sure, I will try. And for the record, my name is Kim Royer. I'm a wildlife biologist with the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department. Currently working on fur bearers, but have worked on land acquisition, land protection through Act 250, private landowner assistance and assistance to towns over my 40-year career, and have been committed to the long-term sustainability of the wildlife populations in Vermont. So thank you for inviting me. I think what the commissioner was saying was that coyotes are a species that is very adaptable, very resilient. It's a territorial animal, and it's got a complex biology in that it defends their territory. So a family group will defend a territory of anywhere from 4 to 8 square miles. They actually will range beyond that, but that's about the size of the territory that they defend, at least in Vermont when we did the research back in the 1980s. But they also can be heavily hunted, and that population will respond with an increase in reproductive rates. Mm-hmm. And so this is something that we have tried to get across to a lot of folks, is that no matter how heavily hunted they are, and we know from what's happened out west where they've hunted tens of thousands of coyotes at a great expense with really no impact to the population out there, that this population is so resilient that it will be maintained regardless. We will have coyotes into the future regardless of how much they're hunted, as long as we don't deplete the population below about 75% of its number year after year after year. And we track our coyote population through some trend indices. We do catch per unit of effort, both using cameras that we have out for American marten and lynx. We can get camera catch per unit of effort that way, but also through our trappers, we collect catch per unit of effort information. And that bears true. That seems to be the case, that our population may go up and down from season to season based on availability of prey species. And that's related to the availability of the prey's food supply.
Right.
So it may go up and down, but the population will basically over the long term stay relatively sustainable. And
Okay.
that's our goal. That's our mission, is to make sure that these populations over the long term will be here for future generations.
Okay. Can I ask you to pause right there? Sorry.
Sure.
We only have Mr. O'Grady for a little window.
That's very fine.
And let me just double check and see if I'm seeing him again because he's ready to roll.
I can share it, but Jude still doesn't have it because of the whole email issue at the State House right now. But I can pull it up from my sent file.
Okay.
We can do that right now if you would like.
Yes, please. So thank you, Ms. Royer. We'll come back to you. And sorry to jump in and out. Yes, please, Mr.
May
O'Grady.
I just ask, is 1.3 similar to 1.2? Do we know? Or I haven't had a chance to look at either one, but
They're pretty subtle changes from 1 to 2 to 3, actually.
okay, great. Thank you.
So S 281, the amendment, it's a strike all of the bill as introduced. Can everyone hear me and see my screen? Actually,
Yes, sir.
okay. So the first provision, subsection A, would prohibit a person from pursuing coyote with the aid of dogs, either for training or for the taking of coyote, except as provided under subsections B and C of the section. So B would allow a person who owns the land to use dogs to pursue coyote on their land in order to defend a person or property. Then C relates to the use of dogs to pursue coyote on land that the person does not own. So a person may use dogs to pursue coyote on land that the person does not own or control in order to defend the person or property, provided that the person who owns or controls the land provided the person who controls the dogs a written request to take the coyote on the land with the use of dogs. A game warden issues the person who owns or controls the land and the person who controls the dogs written approval to take coyote on the land with the use of dogs. And any approval issued by the game warden shall only be valid for a period of time not to exceed 1 week and may only be reissued once for the land for which the original approval was issued. And then you move into the penalties. The Commissioner of Wildlife shall suspend the hunting license, fishing license, and trapping license of a person convicted of a violation of the requirements of this section for a period of 5 years from the day of violation, and shall fine the person not more than $1,000 nor less than $400. And then a second subsequent offense is $4,000 max, nor less than $2,000 minimum. I want to talk about the penalties for a second. Under current law, if you have 20 points in violations in 5 years, you get a 3-year suspension. So this penalty provision, as requested, is significantly different from the other penalties for and the system for license suspension per points. So this is immediately going to one of the highest, if not the highest, level of point assessment or license suspension right away. The penalty amounts, the fine amounts, those are the big game violation amounts. There are a couple of violations in statute that have higher penalty fine amounts. Possession of flesh when not authorized, destruction of state property. They have $2,000 or $2,500 maximum fine. So this is it's kind of in the middle. The general penalty, when there's no specific penalty provided, is up to $1,000 of a fine, up to $1,000 of an administrative penalty. So you're saying it's up to $1,000 max. but it can't be less than 400. And then you're providing for subsequent offenses. So that's a little different, but it tracks the big game violation penalty provision. The points provision is definitely different. And so I'll move on from there.
Thank you. Unless there are any committee questions for Mr. O'Grady on that, and we can come back. Okay, thank you.
Section 2 directs the Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife to submit to the legislature draft legislation establishing requirements or conditions for the use of dogs to pursue coyote. The draft legislation shall include a proposal for permitting the pursuit of coyote with dogs for the training of the dogs. It shall include a proposal for permitting the pursuit of coyote with dogs for the taking of the coyote. It shall require that the dogs used to pursue the coyote to be in control of the person issued the permit. However, the draft legislation shall exclude the use of radio collars, telemetry collars, GPS collars, or similar collars that locate or track dogs as a method of complying with the control requirements of subdivision 3. And the draft legislation shall provide that a person shall be in violation of the prohibition against unlawful trespass under 13 VSA 3705, which is a crime if the person or dogs that the person controls enters onto land posted in compliance with the requirements for posting property against hunting or fishing or trapping. And then the draft legislation shall limit to 2 dogs the number of dogs allowed to be used for the pursuit of coyote, and it shall prohibit the use of bait to take coyote. Then there's a section 3, an implementation section. The first is that the commissioner shall not enforce section 1, the 10 VSA 5008 prohibition on the use of dogs to pursue coyote until September 1, 2022. And prior to September 1, 2022, the commissioner shall provide public notice of the requirements of 10 VSA 5008, and the public notice shall include posting notice on kiosks and signs on Department of Fish and Wildlife lands. And then the prohibition and requirements of 10 VSA 5008 shall remain in effect until amended or repealed by the Vermont General Assembly. And pursuit of coyote as proposed by the Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife under Section 2 of this act shall not be authorized until enacted by the Vermont General Assembly. That's just basically a statement of the fact that statute remains in effect until repealed or amended. And so if you do enact S281 as drafted, 10 VSA 5008 will be law and will remain in effect until repealed or amended. So that is the bill, or the amendment, I should say.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions about the language while we have screen sharing going? Okay, so if you could pull that, stop screen sharing, then we can go back to having a discussion. So I'll explain as the person who made the request of Mr. O'Grady to draft that language. Well, let me pause. I didn't see Senator Campion, your hand is up.
Thank you, Chairman Bray. Mine is just one of timing in terms of process. This is something that isn't being voted today. Is that accurate?
My recommendation to the committee would be to examine this language today. We're putting it on the table. The commissioner has asked for time to respond to us.
Right.
This would provide a pretty clear outline of the.
Yeah, my only question was about voting. Are you thinking about voting it today?
I would say no.
Okay, thanks so much.
It's not my expectation to vote today on this.
Thank you.
Yep. So to double back to sort of the why did I ask Mr. O'Grady to draft this? I think the stories I've heard, and Ms. Royer was, unfortunately, we didn't get to the part of managing behavior, but the commissioner alluded to it. I've received emails about it, heard stories that hazing is, that hounds can be used as a hazing function and help move coyotes out of a part of their range. So the bill recognizes the amendment seeks to try to recognize that function and allow for it, both whether you have hounds of your own or you have someone else come in to do that work on your behalf. And then it says that is the only allowed use of hounds. Other than we ask the commissioner to come back with rules to the General Assembly, because he has said, and other people who actually support hunting coyotes with hounds said, well, it has not been regulated at all, and we would like to see what a regulatory program would look like. So it provides an opportunity for that conversation to happen, and provides an opportunity for the Fish and Wildlife Department to develop that sort of regulation and bring it back to the next legislature. So it's an attempt to provide relief from the situations we've heard about, which I think it's hard to say what their exact number are, but I would say I have no doubt, based on testimony I've heard, not just in the last 6 months, but in the previous decade, that there are very genuinely problematic, sort of, I'll just use the word I was thinking of first, grievous instances of bad encounters between hounds and people who have not sought to have them on their property, and there's been disruption and some trauma. So this is the kind of balance. That's the history we're dealing with. So trying to deal with a way to move forward, and that's the draft amendment. The point of the provisions in the rule is that it really collects together some of the decision points in terms of how you would design such a program, and seeks to lay out thoughts around aspects of a proposed rule that personally I would think would be unacceptable. One of which is that legally and right now, to have a hound out that is collared with a GPS collar constitutes quote unquote control. And I'd say for I don't know of any definition of the word control that allows an animal to be 1, 3, 5, 7 miles away, and you have really no influence over it. It's not under your control. You simply can figure out where that animal is. And it's when that animal is at a distance from the huntsman, that the mishaps that we've heard about can occur. I have no doubt that the people hunting with hounds have no intention of causing harm with their hounds, but because the hounds are out of their control, things happen. So that's an example of a guardrail built into the requested rulemaking and the reason for it. So I'll stop there, and I want to ask the committee to reflect on the amendment. And I think we only have Mr. O'Grady for another couple of minutes to ask Mr. O'Grady any questions they may have while he's still with us.
I do have additional time because my bill on the floor is taking a lot of the House floor, is taking up a lot of the House Natural Resources Committee's time.
Okay.
So I am watching the floor while testifying.
Okay.
That's
Thank you.
why.
So any thoughts from members of the committee? Any questions for Mr. O'Grady, or any questions for me as to why did I ask for provision X, Y, or Z to be included?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator McDonald.
why did you ask for?
So Senator McDonald, then Senator McCormick.
Mr. Chair, I see what is being proposed here. And what's being proposed is because I think the committee agrees that what is going on today is intolerable. The the reasons for it being intolerable are varied. And we have learned a lot from, actually, I've learned more from telephone calls than I did at the long, extensive public hearing we had a few weeks ago, where points of view, the two sides in this were articulated. Some of the phone calls, people have actually, some hunters have actually made suggestions that were thoughtful. But the current practice of dogs running unabated through people's property, scaring their children indoors, stampeding their animals, when land is posted, is intolerable. And some of the hunters who are on the spot say things like, my dogs can't read trespassing signs, or I'm not doing anything illegal, or if you don't like this, you shouldn't have purchased a piece of property here. All of those are intolerable and are, and all the other hunters bear the burden of those comments. And I see, rather than banning hunting with coyotes, that this amendment proposes to bring to heel those who hunt in the intolerable ways that they hunt today. I don't know what we on this committee can do in the next 30 minutes before crossover to initiate a what would appear to be a less draconian approach than simply banning the hunting of coyotes by dogs. It's just a late hour. I would, if we hadn't got another couple of weeks, we could work with some more rational people to allow coyote hunting where owners wish to have it take place and under certain circumstances and for periods of time that were reasonable. But I don't know how we do it in the next half hour.
Well, thank you, Senator McDonald. And just, a reminder. So I think I asked Mr. O'Grady to draft this. It's a lot of new language. And so we won't vote today. I'm not asking the committee to bring this to a vote today, but now we will have it out as a public draft. We'll have all of town meeting week to be able to work with the commissioner informally to get us prepared for the week we come back. And then when we come back, we still have a 1 week window till crossover in order to make any kind of further adjustments to the bill. So it is up tempo, but that I think is sometimes the nature of our job. And especially with the commissioner being interested and already engaged and working on a proposal, and now us sending him a proposal, I think we might make rapid progress. That would be my hope. Senator McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, an inquiry. We're getting short on time. Is it your intention that we use up we have a week off to contemplate where to go, and then 1 more week of action in committee? Is it the chair's intention to get in the leg hold bill and the restructuring of the board bill in that same amount of time, or is the chair looking to just focus on this bill?
I would actually like to schedule a committee discussion on that because we're a group of 5. We make decisions about how to prioritize and move things as a group. So for now, this is the bill in front of us, and I don't know what the committee's decision will be about moving additional bills in time for crossover. I would also note that we've received a related bill on wanton waste, H411, I think it's the number, from the House. And so we may have a germane crossover vehicle in order to continue our work on those other issues.
Mr. Chairman, the committee has already discussed questions of timing when we decided we had 3 bills, wildlife bills, and decided to take this bill up first. There was nothing in that discussion implying that would cut the other 2 bills out.
Absolutely.
That was not the discussion, and it was not the upshot. My understanding, when I agreed to take this bill up first, my understanding was that we were taking it up first,
Yes.
implying that there was something else we would take up next, and then something after that. And that this is actually sort of news to me.
Well, I think for me, the understanding is the same. I wouldn't even, I alone wouldn't say, in terms of the way we manage ourselves as a committee, that I would never say alone, we're just doing this or we're just doing that. I also, though we're a group of 5, I want to make sure that we have the interest of other colleagues to be able to move other pieces. And again, I think there's more than one way to do that, particularly because we have a House bill on the same issue in committee. So it may not be that it's possible we move more than one bill prior to crossover. It's also possible we move all the bills. Some are before crossover. Some are as possible amendments to the House bills, the related germane House bills we receive. So I'm not backing off at all on a willingness to work on all of them.
I'll have to live with that. This coming week, I would like this week to think about this amendment, this strike all amendment. For one thing, the opponents of the coyote hounding bill have often scolded us for allegedly not listening to the people. I'm troubled that anyone in Vermont would think that their legislature doesn't listen. I think often when someone says you're not listening to the people, what they mean is you've listened to the people and you're taking a position I disagree with. But it's phrased as, quote, listen to the people. But I think it is important to continue listening to the people. And I would like this week to hear from people who are troubled about hounding of coyotes as to whether this achieves their ends. I don't give anyone a blank check, but I'd like to know what they think. And for that matter, to continue listening carefully with an open heart and an open mind to the opponents, whether they think they're being listened to or not. And so I'm glad I think we should not vote on this, either the strike all or the bill as introduced today.
Yep.
And I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, agreed. Thank you. Senator Campion or Senator Westman, any thoughts on process or language?
Go ahead, Senator Westman.
I would agree. I don't think this is the time to vote. I think Senator McDonald and McCormick both have expressed that. It's 11 o'clock. I would like to read the draft myself and go through and figure it out. And I get the direction, but I don't get in full what all of the implications of what it would do are. And so I'd like to be able to go through the bill.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, and I would echo what Senator McCormick's comments as well, and others. Yeah, this isn't the time to vote on it. I appreciate the chair's having put it forward, but yeah, it needs to check in with folks.
Okay. Well, great. I mean, I think that it provides,
Sounded like you wanted to push it through today, Senator Bray, but I don't think the committee's interested.
it's always helpful to have a former vice chair
You bet.
in the room. No, so we'll vote it when we come back. And meanwhile, we've put an offer on the table, and others, for both our sake, there'll be a chance to read, reflect, think about it, ask questions, how it all works together. It doesn't, we'll have to learn more. We'll schedule testimony when we return, and look to take it up promptly when we get back, having done some work in between, because we will have just 4 days at that point. And in addition to this bill, we need to move weatherization, and we have some proposals. We asked for proposals related to workforce development, and now we actually received 4 of them. So I would like to work closely with the committee to find a way to amend our weatherization bill to build those workforce recommendations into the degree they need legislative support, and move that bill out in a timely way as well. And it could be that committee's pleasure will involve moving all the fish and wildlife bills that we have out. So let's weigh in on that as well then. Senator Campion?
Senator Bray, just thinking back to timing. So is it accurate that really we have 3 days? Well, our committees, I don't think with the new configuration, is it accurate that we just there'll be 1 day for afternoon committees and then 1 day for morning committees? Will sort of be lost through the new configuration.
I checked with the pro tem. There will be, whether you're a morning or an afternoon committee, you will have committee time every day.
Okay. Great.
On some days you'll have more,
abbreviated,
other days
perhaps.
you'll have less. So, and I had made that request saying that I thought it was very important we always have a legislative day to be able to take action, even if we don't have that much time, so that we could keep the calendar advancing on bills. So thanks for that question.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep. Senator McCormick?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, since we are going to be very short on time, I'd like to get a sense from the committee, if not spoken in this hearing of the committee, but then if people would just email me, what more any member of the committee needs to hear about the leg hold bill. We have taken extensive testimony. We have had a public hearing, and I, for one, of course, I'm sponsor of the bill. I wouldn't have introduced it if I wasn't ready to vote for it. But about others, if they are ready to vote on the bill, or what more would they like to know? What would they like to hear?
Okay. I think that's a very helpful suggestion.
Okay, so please, members of the committee, get in. We have a week off. Of course, it's not a week off, but a week of not being in session to catch up on our work. And I expect to be working harder next week than in the previous weeks, just catching up on everything. But please use that time to let me know, so that I would like us to vote on the leg hold bill. I think we have done our due diligence, and that we should come. I think we're ready to vote now. I'm not going to pull a fast one on the chair and move that we vote, but I expect that I will move for a vote on the leg hold trap early next week.
Okay.
On the grounds that we have done our due diligence already.
Okay, and I'd say for the S-129, the Fish and Wildlife Board, if anyone has questions, concerns about that, if they would send them to Senator Campion in the same way. So I think it's a good idea, Senator McCormick. We might as well borrow a good idea when you hear one. And then I would ask you, Senator McCormick, as sponsor on 201, and you, Senator Campion, as sponsor on 129. Let's speak in the latter half of next week so that I can do some planning for lining up testimony that might address anything that's emerged as a question committee members would like to hear more about. Okay. All right. And I'm sure that we'll hear from other people in the week in between about more information to be shared. All right. So I don't know, Senator McDonald, anything more?
If we finish with this business, I had a short question for Mr. O'Grady. We don't get him that often.
Sure, please go ahead.
So, yeah, one of the things we've learned is that the influx of coyotes to the state of Vermont coincided with the influx of hippies in the 70s, and that's when both of the populations grew at great rates. Have the wildlife biologists, in fact, determined that there is no connection between those two immigrations?
I am going to refrain from responding to that question.
Mr. Chair, this shows why Mr. O'Grady is such a valuable asset to our committee. His answer is right on target. Thank you.
All right. If there are no other questions for Mr. O'Grady, I wanted to double back to Ms. Royer and thank you for pausing and staying with us during the amendment, walking through the amendment. So we talked a little bit about the populations, the resilience of those populations, how hunting levels really don't affect them because they seem to, I don't know if the population keeps growing. I've heard the whole thing of heavy hunting then introduces a stress that the species responds to by having, I don't know if it's more frequent litters or larger litters or both, but so they work to maintain themselves. Do they plateau on the other end? And is that basically based on the amount of prey available to them? Is that what sets their upper limit?
Correct. Basically, they have a home range territory size that they defend. The whole family group tends to defend that territory. And whatever food, however good the habitat is in that particular territory, determines both the size of the territory, but also their reproductive rates. So when you lower the population, you tend to have more food available for what's left, and then their reproductive rates tend to go up. So there's sort of a stasis. I mean, the population stays over the long term relatively stable, although every year or every season can go up and down significantly based on whether you have a high beech nut acorn crop, and then you have a high number of small mammals, and the next year you have a huge food supply, and that increases the population and success of that reproduction for a year. And then, you get a bad winter and not a lot of food, and it goes down again. But over the long term, which is what we care about, that's what our mission is, that population stays relatively stable. And I think your other question was, so what about hunting as a management tool for maintaining wariness on the part of coyotes? And there is a few peer-reviewed documents to this. I guess I would be speaking in terms mostly of my 40 years of experience. Vermont, thankfully, has had very few coyote-human interactions and very few coyote domestic pet interactions. I once in a while get calls from people in South Burlington who have coyotes that have approached too close to their house, or even some cases where they've taken their small dog out of their back porch. Those things happen, but not like they do in Massachusetts, where hunting and trapping have been restricted. And I'll just read you something from an email from Dave Wattles, who's the fur bearer biologist in Massachusetts. This was in response to a request from a Pennsylvania biologist who was saying, does anybody have any materials for hazing of coyotes, because we're starting to have some problems here. And with coyotes taking dogs. And he responded, we actually had 2 incidents he responded, this was about children, but unfortunately, that is an everyday occurrence here in Massachusetts. We just had a child bitten yesterday, which fortunately is not an everyday occurrence. And then he goes on to say, we found that the key to this is really getting people to understand that they have to keep their dog on a leash to prevent attacks from occurring. And in another email, he subsequently says, our agency does not have the ability to discharge firearms in developed areas, which is where many of these occur. As a result, it falls to local police or the environmental police to dispatch the animal if it can be encountered. Our hands are tied in terms of trapping. The restriction on legal traps means that box traps are the only way to trap them, and it's virtually impossible to catch a coyote in one. So they have had continual problems over time as coyotes, they're smart and they become habituated to people very easily. And these are, I think Senator Westman brought up the implications. These are the kinds of implications that we can't really project out what kind of impact this might have going forward on coyote behavior. And what happens is once a coyote becomes habituated, I always tell people who have cattle, if you're not having coyote problems, then probably leave the coyotes that are there alone, because they have they're defending their territory, and they haven't figured out that cows are easy pickings or the calves or your sheep are easy pickings. But once those coyotes have figured it out, you're not going to change that behavior. You're not going to send a bunch of houndsmen in to change that behavior. Those coyotes have learned behavior. Those coyotes are probably going to have to die. So what hounding does is actually maintains a population to some degree that equates people with bad things, and therefore does not approach houses as often as in some states where they become habituated, or come into those suburban areas where they start to really create problems for the homeowners that live there. And Vermont has a lot more of those kinds of places with fragmented landscapes where there's a really good food supply for coyotes, but also a lot of homes scattered throughout, and pets that are people let out at night not on a leash, that are susceptible to being picked off by coyotes. And thankfully, so far, that doesn't happen all that often. But I don't know what will happen if we stop the kind of hazing that's occurring right now.
Right. Well, and I think that's so the amendment proposes to keep hazing, but under a different paradigm. And is it well expressed and crafted now? I guess, that's what we'll figure out. The other thing I've heard about not having a season is that by having hunting year round, it maintains that relationship of coyotes know that people could be dangerous to them, and so they tend to try to stay away from people. Is that one of the sort of foundations of your? I'm just wondering if the department still looks at it that way, so that not having a season is part of maintaining a wariness that then helps avoid the kind of conflicts that we're talking.
Yeah, what I would say is that is one of the potential benefits of a year-round season. I will say that the department does care about promoting the respect for coyotes, and I think one of the senators brought up, that's really, for me, the key is what motivates people, and the respect for the animal. I don't apologize for people who hunt these animals. I think hunting is a legitimate activity. I think it's something that connects us to nature, but I do think that respect for the animals should be part of that hunt, and that's something that we promote quite frequently. So, but anyway, to get back to your question, which was, I think, does that year-round hazing change the behavior? Again, this is based on my experience. I believe that is one of the benefits of a year-round hunting season. Some states have actually instituted things like raffles for coyotes and bounties for coyotes, which we have never supported and don't believe that shows respect for the animal. We don't want people to view this animal as vermin. And once people have problems with wildlife, and you guys probably have experienced this, If you can't solve that problem, then the animal becomes, it's the animal that loses. The animal ends up getting taken out, often in a way that's wasted. So our goal is to maintain populations that allow people to enjoy these animals for whatever reason they want to, whether they hunt them, whether they trap them, or whether they just like to hear the coyotes sing out at night. Whatever those reasons, we want to make sure that every public has access to those animals in whatever way they care about, as long as we can maintain a population that's sustainable. That's our mission and that's our goal. And sharing this resource is what it's about. That's what we're trying to do, is parse this resource up so that the people who want to know, who care about these animals for their intrinsic value and want to make sure they're out there and want to go out and hear them or see them, can do that, while other people are utilizing them in a local way that's just as valuable as anything else that we eat, and probably has less impact on our native populations and our ecosystems than shipping cotton garments from the South or eating soy products. And so we're encouraging people to use a local resource for their food and clothing, because we think it has less of an impact on the ecosystem, on climate change, on all the things that we're concerned about. So that's really our philosophy behind all of this.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us this morning and helping us learn more. And I also want to convey through you back to the commissioner and all your colleagues in Fish and Wildlife that when we ask questions about these contentious issues, that they draw so much attention that I think what it obscures the respect and support we have for you as sort of your committee in the State House to support the many good, all the good work that you do, conservation and wildlife biology, and on and on and on. So over the years, we know we have a lot to appreciate, and I just hope you'll convey that points of contention are a point on a broad spectrum of things that we agree on and support one another on. So I don't want to lose sight of that important relationship. And
thank you. I really appreciate that, and understand we deal with points of contention. Really, that's been my life, is points of contention and trying to balance the needs of the whole public. And it's a challenge, as you guys have seen. So I really do appreciate that feedback, and I will pass it along. Okay. And I will also say, if you have any questions about trapping, I don't think I've had a chance to speak to that, but there's been a huge volume of science that's gone on in the last 20 years that I think has some relevance to this discussion, and would be happy to provide that if you're interested.
Okay, thank you very much. So committee, it's 11:26 and we're due on the floor at 11:30. So unless anyone has any further business they want to bring up, I would move that we adjourn for